corruption in Nigeria didn't just appear out of nowhere. It didn't start with democracy, and it didn't begin after independence in 1960. To truly understand why corruption feels so deeply embedded in the system, we need to go back much further. We have to examine how governance itself was first introduced to the region. Welcome to our series on the roots of corruption in Nigeria. This is episode 1, the Colonial Foundations. Let us get one thing straight from the start. British colonial administration in Nigeria was never designed to serve the Nigerian people. Its purpose was brutally simple and pragmatic. First, extract as many raw materials as possible: palm oil, cocoa, tin, you name it. Second, maintain law and order, but only to the extent that it allowed for smooth extraction. And third, protect colonial economic and political interests above all else. This wasn't a partnership, it was a business operation. Under this system, governance was a top-down affair. All major decisions were made by a small group of British officials, far away from the communities they affected. Local participation was either non-existent or purely symbolic. Think about what this does to the relationship between the government and the people. Accountability flowed in only one direction, upward, from the colonial officer to his superiors in London. It never flowed downward to the Nigerian people whose lives were being governed. This created a powerful and lasting precedent. The idea that power exists above society, not as a part of it. The government was seen as an external force, something to be either feared or manipulated, but never truly owned by the people. To manage a territory as vast and diverse as Nigeria, the British couldn't be everywhere at once. So, they implemented a system called indirect rule. On the surface, it seemed clever. They would govern through existing traditional leaders, the emirs, obis, and chiefs. This made administration cheaper and more efficient. But this system came with a hidden, toxic side effect. These traditional leaders, who once derived their legitimacy from their own people, now answered to a new master, the British colonial officer. Their power no longer depended on serving their communities. It depended on keeping the colonial administration happy. Loyalty to the crown was rewarded with resources, power, and protection. Accountability to their own people was completely ignored. If a local leader abused their authority, as long as the raw materials kept flowing and the people remained quiet, the colonial officers often looked the other way. Why? Because investigating every local dispute was complicated and didn't serve their primary mission of extraction. This unintentionally normalized a very dangerous concept: authority without responsibility. You could hold a position of power, control resources, and make decisions that affected thousands, all without ever having to answer for your actions to the people you governed. This created a new political class whose allegiance was not to their kin, but to an external power that rewarded compliance over justice. The very meaning of leadership began to shift. It became less about stewardship and more about personal proximity to the colonial state. This laid the groundwork for a political culture where public office was seen as a pathway to personal enrichment, not public service. Now, let's talk about the administrative engine of the colonial state, the bureaucracy. The colonial civil service was the machinery that made the entire system run. These clerks, officers, and administrators held immense power. They controlled everything from permits to trade, to licenses for farming, to the right to even move from one district to another. They were the gatekeepers of the colonial economy. And with this great power came very little oversight. A vast gap existed between the handful of senior British officials and the many local administrators on the ground. In this environment, what do you think happened? Access to the government wasn't a right, it became a privilege. Getting a permit wasn't about meeting the criteria, it was about who you knew or what you could offer. Favoritism and personal connections became the unofficial currency of the administration. This wasn't necessarily because every single person was inherently immoral or corrupt. It was because the system itself created powerful incentives for this behavior. If your salary was low, but you had the power to grant a valuable license, the temptation to ask for a dash or a gift was immense. The system didn't just allow for corruption in many ways, it rewarded it. It became a logical response to a structure where formal rules were less important than informal networks. Over decades, these quiet, informal practices became embedded into the DNA of public administration. Corruption wasn't a bug in the system, it was slowly becoming a feature. So, When Nigeria finally gained independence in 1960, what kind of system did it inherit? It wasn't a system built on democratic accountability or public service. It was a state designed for control and extraction. The new Nigerian leaders stepped into a structure with highly centralized authority, where power was concentrated at the top. They inherited a system with incredibly weak mechanisms for accountability, where leaders were not accustomed to answering to the public. And they inherited a bureaucratic culture where the lines between public office and private gain were already dangerously blurred. This wasn't a fresh start. Nigeria was handed a political structure that was already primed for exploitation. This was the fertile soil in which the seeds of large-scale corruption would grow for decades to come. The colonial era didn't just take resources from Nigeria. It left behind a framework of governance that made the nation vulnerable to corruption from within. The story, of course, doesn't end there. In our next episode, we will explore how the decades of military rule that followed independence took these foundational problems and deepened them, pouring concrete over the cracks and creating the complex challenges we face today. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more. We'll see you in the next episode.